Hello, everybody, and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf and to another update slash check-in for one of my two big projects. This one, the 1001 books by women I want to read before I die. If you're not familiar, I made my own list because the books, there are these books, 1001 books you have to read before you die, but they are mostly male and mostly white. And I think maybe a third, if it's a lot, then it's a third women, mostly less than that. So I thought I'd make my own list, exclusively women. You can find, I will leave a link to my Goodreads shelf down below. You can check it out. There is the total shelf, but also the TBR and the things that I read. So maybe you are interested in that. And once in a while, every 3-4 months, I will give you an update on where I stand and how many books I have still to read and, all the good stuff. I'm taking it slow or slower this year than I did last year. Last year, I had 52 books on the list and I read 52 books. This year, I want to dial it down a little bit to 30-ish. Also because there is this other big project, Reading Europe, where I want to read at least one book from each European country. Sometimes they overlap. By the way, there are books in Reading Europe that are also qualifying for the 1001 Women, but yeah. So I'm taking it a little bit slower today. That's also the reason, or not today, this year, that's also the reason that I'm not going to do an update every month or even every 2 months. I think probably 4 updates a year should be enough. But anyway, the list on that I link below, the Goodreads shelf list, is fluctuating. I mean, it's changing. In other words, I had an initial list of 1001 books. Some of them I have already read, of course, but sometimes I find books that I think should be on the list, and there are some books in that original 1001 that are kind of feel like a little bit like placeholders, because I, for instance, want to limit myself to 2 books per author, even Jane Austen or George Eliot. But sometimes I just, in the initial original list, I put 3 books so that I could reach the 1001 and also give me some wiggle room, because I was sure, and it happens all the time, that I come across books either because one of my viewers tells me about something, especially books from non-European countries. And then I want to add a book. And of course, because the number is fixed, 1001, then I have to chuck a book. So I'm glad that there are these kind of placeholders. Anyway, a lot of preliminary remarks, because I added 3 books over the last couple of months. The first one is this one, Samantha Harvey, Orbital. It won the Booker Prize. I'm not going to say anything about this thing here. It won the Booker Prize last year, and I really loved it. And I thought I also want to add some contemporary or very recent books, not that many, but this I thought is, for me, has a really special place in my heart. It's about a spaceship orbiting around Earth, Orbital, and she follows the astronauts through astronauts and cosmonauts, because there's also Russian crew. 2 crew members are Russian, follows them through one day of 16 times orbiting the Earth. And I thought this was just a brilliant book. I also added a book that I'm currently rereading, as you can see, and that is Feminist City by Leslie Kern. This is a non-fiction book about, she's a a professor for urban development, gender studies. So she combines feminist studies, gender studies, with a look at how we plan our urban landscapes, our cities, whether they are gender neutral. And spoiler alert, they aren't. So, for instance, just one example, if you have planning for which roads in a city you will plow in the winter or salt, it's always the ones that are most used by the male population, the typical male population going to work, whereas people with strollers or people children have to bring children to school, those are always last. So this is a really interesting exploration of how patriarchal systems actually really bleed into everyday life and something like urban planning. So I thought this definitely deserves a place on that list, 1001 Women. And then a book that I read a long time ago, and I was unsure about this one because I'm not yet 100% sure what I want to do with the nonfiction. Oh, I should have said my list, the lists in those books, 1001 books you have to read, they are always only fiction. I wanted to combine fiction and nonfiction, even though the fiction portion is much bigger. So it's 2/3 fiction and 1/3 nonfiction, so about 300 books. But I'm still kind of feeling my way through what type of nonfiction do I want to include. I mean, obviously the book has to be written by a woman, but books like this, do they always have to be the books I want to include feminist? And not all feminist literature I want to include because, so I'm still feeling my way here. And this book it has nothing to do with feminism. It's a historical nonfiction book by Gitta Sereny, Into That Darkness. And it's about this guy, from mercy killing to mass murder, Franz Stangl, who was one of the most notorious guards or in charge of, he was not a commander, but he was in charge of some of the concentration camps. Doesn't really matter. So this is a brilliant book, written by a female author. In the end, I thought, yes, let's include this. Let's also just trying to promote really exceptional nonfiction writers. But I didn't include brilliant nonfiction writers who wrote about nature. So, like I said, I'm still finding my way. If you have ideas what type of nonfiction written by women I should include, should I limit myself to nonfiction books who are actually about women? Or should I include books like that? But for now, this one was included. Okay, then the books that I read recently, the last check-in I think was in January or February. The first one, and I also chuck books off the list if I have included them and I think they're really, really horrible. But not always. And the next one is a good example for that. And that is Anais Nin, Delta of Venus, published in 1977. I read this, or we attempted to read it. So I read this with Terri, from Miss Terri B. And we both DNF'd it. I then sort of skim read it. It's Anais Nin is a famous memoirist and she wrote a lot of diaries. She had a relationship with Hemingway, sort of a threesome with Hemingway and his wife. She was born in France, but writes in English, lived in the US. And this is her most famous collection of stories, erotica. I'm not a big fan. I mean, I'm just not, it's not my thing, erotica stories. But this is certainly on all the lists, if you know. But I thought it was just horrible. It was not erotica, because most stories deal with it. It was a glorification of things that I feel shouldn't be glorified, like sexual abuse, rape, incest, child abuse. No, I felt that this was just a patriarchal bullshit, to be honest. But because it's so famous and because it says also something about our culture, I wanted to keep it on the list, even though I thought it was a really bad book, and I didn't read it properly. I mean, I DNF'd it and skim read through it. So that was one. The next one was also a buddy read with Adam from Memento Mori, and we read Dasha Drindic, Trieste, translated from the Croatian by Elias Bosac. If I'm didn't have that right in the description, there is the translator, of course. Now, Dasha Drindic was a Croatian author. She died about 10 years ago or something. And I read two previous books by her, which I really liked. I met her once. We share a publisher, so I met her at one of the book fairs that we had to go to to present our books. And she is just the most lovely person, or was the most lovely person. That might also influence how I appreciate her books, because she was such a generous, lovely, nice, kind person to just, yeah. Anyway, but this book is about the Holocaust in Italy. So it looks at an Italian family during the 1930s up to the end of the war. It is written as a flashback looking book in 2006, I think. Yes, 2006. The main character of the book, who is now an old woman, Haya, she is expecting to finally meet her son. She had an affair with an SS officer and got pregnant, and then the child was taken away from her to serve, the Nazi ideology of children given to Nazi officers because she was Jewish. So that is the frame of the book. We learn about Haya's family, about, the impact that Nazi Germany and, of course, Mussolini's reign had on Italy. The family is living in the vicinity of Trieste. But the book is, for a big part, I would say more than half of the book is actually kind of non-fiction. Because the officer that Drindic chose to have the affair with our fictional character is an actual SS officer. So she gives us history of the SS officers and their policies in Italy. There is transcripts from later, after the war, trials of Nazi officials. There is a long, it's like 20 or 40 pages of lists of people, Jewish people who were killed, who were murdered in Italy by the Nazis. So not died during the war, but killed in concentration camps. So it's this combination. And for me, this really, really worked very well. I thought the idea to pick one family and kind of have a juxtaposition of this one family with the enormous the enormity of what happened, but also have this idea of, we know a lot about the perpetrators and their trials, but we know very little about the people who died, because there were so many. So this list, I mean, the fictional character here is one of those people, so to speak, because family members died. But yeah, I think it's not for everyone. This very much non-fiction part. I think it was her way, the author's way of trying to come to terms with the enormity of what happened, the monstrosity of it all, but still focus it down on one family. So like I said, for me, it really, really worked very well. But yeah, give it a try. I would say it's certainly worth it. And for me, this was a fantastic read, even though it was not easy, of course. So those were two books that I kind of finished. Books coming up, just very briefly, what I want to read over the summer or until I would say September. This is one, Nancy Mitford, The Pursuit of Love, and there are other novels in this book. The Pursuit of Love is on my list, so I will read that. Nancy Mitford, of course, is one of the Mitford sisters. I read a biography of them a while back, and this is published 1945, and it looks at a coming-of-age story, satirizing high society, so to speak, before the Second World War. So the upper class in pre-war London and Paris. And the other book I'm going to read with Adam from Memento Mori sometime, maybe August, September, not sure yet. We have to finish another book first, and that is Muriel Spark's Memento Mori. Muriel Spark also has the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie on the list, which I love. And this one is about an older group of people who get these strange phone calls. Remember that you're gonna die. Memento Mori. So I'm really looking forward to reading this with Adam, who has read this book multiple times. So for him, it's the 158th reread. So those are the two that are at least in the planning. And then for the numbers, I also want to give you the numbers at the end, and that is the books read 569 and the books unread 432. So this is as we stand on the 8th of June, with more than half. I mean, I'm way over half. It's only 432 still to read. So if I read 30 books a year, it will still take me more than 10 years to finish this project. But anyway, the next update, like I said, will be sometime in the fall, probably in September. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Looking forward to your comments as always, and I'll see you all soon in the next one, which will not be next Sunday. Next Sunday, I'm taking a little break. So 2 weeks from now on Sunday.